What's up, my beautiful people? Welcome back to See It Through My Eyes. I'm Richie, here with another episode of Storytime with me. I will be discussing mental health, specifically my struggles and my story and journey with mental health. I am turning 31 in February, so that's 31 years, and I want to say at least 22, 22 or 23 years of my life that I've been struggling with depression, with anxiety, and with trauma, PTSD. I was technically diagnosed with those three disorders at the age of 20. However, since the age of 8 that I remember, I have been dealing with the three of them. So today, just a little therapeutic episode for myself, and hopefully if it can help anybody out there who's struggling and dealing and has gone through or knows people who are going through similar situations as mine. Hopefully this can help you guys feel a little bit better, put a smile on your face, maybe not make you feel not so feel so alone. Because mental health is something serious, and I'm always going to advocate for more attention and more resources to take better care of your mental health. So hopefully this is informative, and it helps anybody out there. Starting off at the age of 8, as I mentioned, it's the earliest that I remember going through situations where I was dealing with depression. And as anybody who has dealt with any kind of depression, um, you know, there's a huge difference between feeling sad and feeling depressed. The same thing with anxiety. I would say those are the two things that at an early age I started feeling that. I was born with my visual impairment. So, my entire life I've had to live with my disability. I was diagnosed at 6 also with type 1 diabetes. So that has always added a lot of stress and distress to my life. And at the age of 8, those two medical conditions and disability, it took a toll on me. I would feel a lot of loneliness, a lot of loneliness. And I'm sorry, I'm fighting the cold, so excuse me, clear my throat a lot. I'm not crying, but I dealt with a lot of loneliness, feeling like nobody cared about me, feeling that nobody understood me, feeling that I had nobody. Um, Both at school and at home. I felt lonely. I At home there was a lot of problems growing up with my family, so I always felt anxious at home because of that. I felt depressed because of a lot of the things that were happening with the adults in my family when I was a child that I didn't have control over. I dealt with a lot of self-image problems because in my family, at least growing up, a lot of the times people will refer to me in Spanish as the sick child. And it's not, making fun of them or anything like that. It's meant to refer to somebody, like, oh, this person has this disability or this medical condition. But obviously being the person who is hearing that and living through that, especially as a child, it doesn't feel good. And I used to hate that. And I still do, because unfortunately family members still refer to me sometimes as that. And I hate that because it makes me feel like you take the individuality and you just see me as a disability. And at 8 years old, it took a toll on me, toll on my self-esteem. And I used to just think that that's how everybody saw me as. I would go to school and I was the only disabled child. And I felt that a lot of the kids kind of saw me in the same way, just the kid with the disability. We got to be careful. We can't do this because he can get hurt. I also mentioned in a couple videos on the channel already, I had a student aide, so she would have to constantly be right by me. And obviously being kids, no kids are gonna want an adult, especially a older adult being right there when you're just trying to be a kid. But unfortunately, I was connected to that student aide. So I felt isolated a lot of the time. Obviously, being diabetic and having a visual impairment, I also had to be on my own. I had to work with a VI teacher, visually impaired teacher that would come to school and take me out of classes, and I would have to learn, whether it was Braille or a lot of the assignments. She would have to help me as I was working with that. I also had to learn, mobility. With my diabetes, I would have to go with the nurse and check my blood sugar. So it was a lot of the times that I couldn't do other things that kids were doing in gym. Especially, I couldn't do a lot of things because either my blood sugar, but especially my vision. I wasn't able to play certain sports with the other kids in gym because I could get hurt, or I couldn't see this or I couldn't see that, or my blood sugar could drop, and it always made me feel isolated, growing up. I used to compare myself a lot to other kids, and I used to always ask, why me? Why am I different? Why was I born with what I was born? And then situation at home, I didn't select any of that, it was put on me. I also attended communion school. I was brought up as a Catholic, and at an early age, religion, was put on me, to believe in God, to be grateful. But I grew up thinking like, why should I? Why should I? What type of God does that to a child? I didn't do anything bad to anybody. So why was I born with this visual impairment and then a couple years later diagnosed with my diabetes? Then put into a situation at home that was not ideal for a child. And then I'm just trying to live my life, or at least what I can, and I'm not able to have friends at school because, either kids treat me a certain type of way. There were kids who also teased me, bullying me around, and it was just a lot. And at a very early age, I started just not straight up thinking, offing myself, but for sure not wanting to be in this world anymore. And I didn't understand, exactly the severity of all that. So that was kind of the start, but unfortunately not the end of my journey through mental health, dealing with depression and anxiety. So fast forwarding a little bit from the age of 8 to the age of 12. This is I would say another impactful and important part of my life, my preteens, where my attitude started changing. I was still dealing with a lot of depression and anxiety. And at this point, even though I didn't know it, I was dealing with the symptoms of PTSD from the stuff that I was watching at home. At this age, though, things did change drastically in my life. The way I was responding. Because to give a little bit about myself, kind of going a little bit backwards, I was never a violent child. If anything, I was a real sensitive kid. Which also got me made fun of. Kids with, oh, you're gay, oh, boys don't act sensitive, and I have never thought that I, was homosexual, not that there's anything wrong with that. But I was, at an early age, kind of programmed to think that, boys aren't sensitive. And I was a sensitive boy. I am a sensitive boy, man. So by the age of 12, my whole demeanor had changed, my whole view of life, and just the way I went about things. I was an honor student at an early age in school. Even though I was struggling with everything, that was one thing about me, that I was an honor student. I would say from first grade all the way to fifth grade. And it wasn't until sixth grade that everything started changing. I went from having nothing but A's on my report cards to nothing but F's. Constantly getting into trouble, starting to fight. I would get into a lot of fights with the kids that I mentioned earlier that would try to tease me and would try to bully me. I wouldn't stay quiet, I wouldn't stay still, and I would fight back. I would talk back to my student aide, talk back to any staff member. And even at home, it became the same thing. I started fighting back with my parents. When I would see violence, I would respond with violence. And I started becoming more numb, and it started becoming more natural to me. And in my mind, it was kind of like, from adult now, I could look at it that as a child, I started kind of registering that the only way for people to respect me, the only way for people to hear me, only way for life to leave me alone was to respond with violence. And I started hanging around with, kids that were constantly in trouble. And my family, my parents, obviously, they didn't approve of that, and I don't regret that, because even though that, at first they were looking at me like, this nerdy blind kid, eventually I also proved that, I was a badass. I was getting into trouble. I was holding out my own in fights. I was doing things that in their mind, stupid little 12-year-olds, that's cool. So I ended up earning their respect and their friendship. And they had my back throughout, the last 3 years of middle school. They also drugged me to get into more trouble. And my parents, like I said, not approving of that. But I would defend it because I was like, they're the only ones that actually know me, that seem to want to get to know me, that seem to want me to be around, not like the other kids. Like I mentioned, it seemed like they didn't want me to be around. So that was kind of a drastic change. And what kind of started a new path in my life, especially in my early years, where there was a lot of aggression, a lot of violence, just being numb, not caring about my life, not caring whether I lived or died, not caring about my academic life. And obviously, I cared about people, I cared about my friends, and obviously I cared about my family. But that was one of the parts of my life where I saw myself lose who I genuinely was. Like I said, I went from a sensitive, good kid, an honors kid, to a troublemaker that was numb and thought that the only solution to problems were violence. So that was kind of a very important part to what my life is now. So skipping from the age, I would say 12 and 13, kind of moving into my early teen years, specifically when I first started high school. I have mentioned about this in the episodes, Tales of the Community with Ian. By the way, so please check those videos out. And I will be doing a story time episode about my time in high school, but kind of just going a little overview about my time in high school and my teen years. I started a lot of more depression. I started isolating myself from just everybody. I went from middle school to high school thinking, what's the point of trying to interact with other kids? The ones that I was with for over 8 years in school didn't want to be my friends. What, these new strange kids, why are they going to accept me? And then I didn't actually go to the neighborhood high school. I went to a different high school, Curie High School, because they had the equipment and technologies for my vision impairment problem that, the high school in my neighborhood didn't have. So I obviously was going to go out to even a whole new neighborhood in the city. So when I got over there, I became even more isolated. I wouldn't talk to anybody. I mentioned this in one of the Tales of the Community episode, where a lot of the kids in the community, the other kids with disabilities, they would try to get me to hang out with them. There was a section where we would wait for the school buses. We were on the yellow buses, especially those who lived from far. So we would have to wait for the buses outside of the school by the bus doors, we would call them. And, we would be there for a couple minutes, sometimes an hour, depending on, the school buses and the drivers. Anyways, and a lot of the time, the kids would be like, hey, Ricardo, come over here. And I will always say no, hey, thanks, but I'm good. And I will always be in a little corner by myself. And every day, especially at the beginning of freshman year, I used to come home and I just felt like shit about myself. Just always asking myself, what's wrong with me? People don't like me, just all these things. I started getting into darker mindsets. Like I mentioned, I started taking the mindset that violence was the answer to all my problems. Well, it intensified when I got to high school. I started getting into more fights. I also started ditching more. I started getting into more arguments with teachers and staff. My dating life improved a little bit, but not in the good sense, because a lot of those relationships were toxic. I started finally making friendships towards the end of freshman year, specifically within the group of the students with visual impairments. And I even dated a couple of girls in there. But my my uh my opinion about myself, it still wasn't good. I still I still hated, my own skin. And in a lot of occasions, I started, actually contemplating ending my life. And it became a norm. And unfortunately, it also became a norm to talk about that with other friends of mine at school who also had the same type of, ideology. And I don't, now as an adult, I look back and I'm like, it wasn't a good mix. Because if anything, that made me feel worse about my life. And throughout the 4 years of high school and my teen years, you know, towards the end, I would say things started kind of seeming a little bit different. Obviously, I started getting older. I also started coming across different people. She knows who she is. She's one of our subscribers. I have a lot of gratitude and a lot of love for her because if it wasn't for her, I don't know where I would be. I met her around when I was 15, but we didn't really start hitting it off till I was like 16, 17. And she's just the complete opposite of me. Um, Her personality is very bubbly, very, positive, very outgoing. And that, having that type of influence in my life helped me a lot. Um, it made me feel better about myself, especially when she would tell me, you got to love yourself. And she would point out all the things that, all the good things about myself. It would help me because I was so used to both me and other people around me pointing out the bad. I got suspended a lot. Like I said, I almost got arrested. I got into using, drugs. I started ditching. I don't know how the hell I ended up graduating, because the first 3 years of high school were pretty bad, just academically. And I didn't care because I didn't care about my future. I started hanging around even worse crowds and I started doing things, illegal things that I wasn't supposed to be doing. And the mindset that I had was either way at the age of 18, I'm going to be behind bars or I'm going to be 6 feet underground. That's going to be my life. And I was okay with it because I was so numb to it. I'm not going to say too much of it, but just for legal reasons. But if I would have had gone through with a lot of decisions or plans that I had, I wouldn't be here. And I thank the Lord that I did. I thank the people that were there for me that they talked me out of a lot of those things. Both the things that I wanted to harming myself as well as harming others. Because at that point, it went from wanting to hurt myself, to wanting to hurt other people. And it got out of hand. I felt that I wasn't in control. I felt like I was in the passenger seat. You got me? And I felt that, there was like a demon inside of me. That had the driver, the steering wheel. And I was just seeing everything happen. And I felt I wasn't, that's one of the darkest points of my life because I felt so lost. Luckily, like I said, towards the end of high school, I was in a better place mentally, emotionally. Still had a lot of work to do, but compared to years prior, it was a completely, change. So moving on, right after high school, in my late teens, where my life once again kind of made another change. And at this point, I started, obviously I was moving away from using drugs, obviously no longer in high school. I was in community college, something that was a shocker for me, especially when I got the acceptance letter I went to Harold Washington Community College. And it was so surreal for me because, like I said earlier, my future plans was being 6 feet underground or being, behind bars for the rest of my life. So being able to, go to college, like it was something that I never, even thought of. And it was all thanks to the help of my English teacher senior year, Mr. Sam Geraci, in high school, that he pushed me. He really did push me. He believed in me. He supported me, and he always was there for me. He helped me through a lot of trauma of my past. He also helped me to, take school more serious and want a future for myself. So wherever you are, Tracy, if you ever hear this, you don't know how much that meant to me, and thank you so much, because that really helped me in a big way in my life. Personally, when I got to that age, I was still friends with the group of friends that I mentioned from at least high school. I had two different groups of friends, but for at least this story, well, I guess both. Those two, it was one group of friends that I was friends with outside of high school, and then the one that I was friends with inside of high school. Ian was part of the one within high school. Um, and both groups, I started seeing, people drift away. That's just how friendships go. People moving away, people getting jobs, people going to school, people, falling out, just not wanting to hang out, not talking to you anymore, just all of that. And that happened for both groups of friends. And I feel, now I talk about it with Ian, like I didn't realize it then, but I was trying to attach myself to those groups of friends because I didn't want to lose those friends. Going into to college, where I didn't know anybody. Like just hitting the restart button once again, like I had when I went from middle school to high school. Now as an adult, I got to college, and it was just all so new to me. And I felt alone. And it wasn't the same thing as high school, because now, I wasn't really caring about, being the popular kid, or making friends or any of that. I was taking my academic career a little bit more serious. In high school, towards senior year, it was suggested to me, and it was because I had taken a psychology class, that a career in psychology might be something that I might want to pursue. So, working with a counselor from an agency that was connected to the high school resource room. That counselor, who is no longer my counselor, he knows who he is, but he was my counselor for a lot of years of my college year life. And I've talked a little bit about this before, because I had no confidence, and I didn't really know too much about, obviously college, but also like to how to advocate for myself and advocate for my visual impairment. I depended a lot about what other people told me, a lot of what my counselor told me, that, to do this and to do this, so that way I can have this career. And I told myself, it's a good career, so I pursued a associate's degree. It took me a little bit longer than what it was supposed to, but no, nevertheless, I finished my degree. I got my degree around 2019 in social work, and it did change my life. Around this time too, once I graduated, I also started realizing that I had to take my visual impairment more serious. In middle school, I wasn't walking around with a cane. I wasn't walking around with, glasses. So unless you knew me or you knew of me, it was a little bit harder for other people to tell that I was visually impaired. But when I got to college, people told me the teachers especially told me, the people out there won't know you. They won't care if you're disabled or not. So you have to, go out there and let them know that you're disabled and that you need accommodation. So I had to learn how to walk around again with a white cane, and walk around, traveling from home to school, and walk around the whole school. And it was a little embarrassing because I was so far from that. Like I mentioned before, I I did everything to avoid being labeled as someone with a visual impairment, or as the stereotype of what a person with a visual impairment was. So when I got to college, and now I had no other choice but to walk around with a cane. I had no other choice but to have a student aid in my classes, and, read Braille, and just look more, quote unquote, what the stereotypic blind person looks like. And that took a toll on me. And I didn't really realize until years later that had taken a toll on me. Outside of my academic life, in my romantic life, I was all, that never stopped me from dating. I was dating somebody, and what I realize now, in my older years, that then I wanted to settle down. You know, I got engaged. I have plans to move in with this chick, start a family, all this. And, you know, we were in our late teens. Um, it didn't work out. And I'm glad it didn't, because I'm not sure how that would have gone. You know, it wasn't like my feelings towards this female was that strong, but it was, you know, I'm with her. I feel like there's a future with her. Um, and that's kind of how it went, honestly, for a lot of the relationships, even after her. Um, which created a lot of attachment issues, like I mentioned earlier, not just to friends, but also to relationships, romantic relationships. Um, Another aspect that happened in my early 20s was the fact that I also started realizing that a lot of wounds were open to a lot of my past. Like I mentioned earlier, this is around the time that I started also taking therapy a little bit more serious, and taking a little bit more, doing therapy a little bit more often. I was diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, and depression, and I didn't really know how to deal with any of that, you know, and a lot of those wounds from my past started opening up, and I had to deal with a lot of those emotions, from, you know, dealing with my self-esteem because of my visual impairment and, you know, my health, to a lot of the past traumas with my family and, you know, my home life, to a lot of the traumas that I went through growing up, to just a lot, you know, a lot of issues that was popping up, and I didn't know how to deal with them. And I dealt with a lot of more depression around my 20s, and I didn't know how to deal with them. Like I said, if anything, where my teen years, it was violence and drugs. In my 20s, it was attaching myself to friendships and relationships. And they weren't always the healthiest ones. And I had this mindset that if I manipulated people, that they were going to stick around and they weren't going to leave me. Or I had the mindset of, if I do everything for people, they're going to love me. I had the mindset of, I'm not good enough, so I have to do enough for them to like me, to love me, to accept me, to be my friends, to want to be with me. Um, like I mentioned in the previous episode of Story Time, I also had the mindset at this point, you know, it was a little bit older because it started when my teen years, but in my 20s, it continued, of having the mindset of a toxic relationship is a good relationship. Because, you know, manipulating, you know, controlling your partner means that you love them. That was the mindset that I had, because that was also the example that I was given at an early age. So to the next stage of my life, where I would say another big change happened. This is around the time that I would be 19 years old. I was just finishing up my associates. I had started school for my bachelor's degree. Still in social work, obviously in a different, this time in a university instead of a community college. Around this time, I once again was single and once again started dating around. Um, and I'll be touching on a lot of these different phases of my life as I go along, both on story time as well as videos of tales of the community. So please stay tuned for that. But it was around the time that me and Ian had just started talking once again. Me and Ian had a fallout in 2017, and for 2 years we had no communication with each other besides mutual friends. But we will be touching on that in a future episode. So around this time, like I said, we had just started talking again. I had done my internship to finish up my associate's degree in a addiction clinic as a counselor. And it was something that I never really had expected when I was going with my career in social work, about working at an addiction clinic or interning in an addiction clinic. But I'm grateful that I ended up there. I was dropped there last minute by my teacher, but that's a different story. But I met a lot of good people. I learned a lot about compassion. I also was able to kind of deal with a lot of my own demons when it came to addiction. I learned how to facilitate support groups. And I also learned, and that's where it started, the itch to want to become a motivational speaker. I wanted to do a thank you speech at the end of one of the graduations for some of the what do you call it, the clients for the support groups. One of those support groups that I have facilitated. So I wanted to do like a 5 minute speech at their graduation. And afterwards, everybody was, congratulating me and everything. And a guy that he himself was an alumni at one point. He was a motivational speaker. And I can't drop his name because I don't have consent. I don't have communication with him, but he's a real good guy. But he had told me that, he believed in me to become a motivational speaker. And I started working with him, and I started working with other guys that in the addiction clinic that I started mentoring. And that kind of gave me an idea of where I wanted to be, because once I got my associate's degree, I didn't really knew what direction to go. I knew, obviously social work and all that, but then when I would ask myself, okay, but where exactly do I want to go after that? You get me? Like, once I get my degrees, what population do I want to work with? What exactly what type of counselor do I want to be in? I had never had an answer for any of that, so when I kind of found this passion of motivational speaking, it was something that I never thought wanted, I always have had, social anxiety. I never thought I was going to do. But the fact that I was getting that confidence, and I was getting the opportunities, and I was getting that practice, it really helped me. And around this time, I would say, I call it the awakening. I feel that I was in a coma my entire life, or at least from the age of 8 to the age of 19, a span of over a decade. And I feel like it was an awakening, where I started even getting, finally getting closer to God. Like I mentioned earlier, you never had a good idea or a good opinion about religion or spirituality or about God. And all of it changed my life. Unfortunately, as things sometimes don't always go the way you want them to go, leading into 2020, as you all know, the pandemic happened. Like I mentioned in my first episode of Storytime, I moved out, and I moved into a facility that housed people with visual impairments. And I moved in with 2 roommates, one close to my age and the other one was older. And as I mentioned, please check that out, Storytime with Richie, about my toxic roommate. But yeah, it was that, along with other things. Romantic life was not going the way I wanted it. Family life got better though, at least that. I dropped out of school because I just felt I was burnt out. And then towards the end of 2020, when I was talking to another friend of mine, he brought up the idea of podcasting. Like I mentioned in a previous video, I had always been told that, I have the voice of a radio host, and people have always told me you should be on radio. And I was like, no, I don't, what the am I going to do on radio? So when people came to me and they were like, yeah, you should try podcasting. So people kept telling me about podcasting. So I went around talking to a few people, a couple of my friends, family members, my brother Omar, and my cousin, and my cousin Jesus, obviously. A lot of people were like, yeah, podcasting isn't me, blah, 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 blah. Then finally, the 2 people that had accepted to do podcasting with me was, of course, my cousin Jesus and one of my closest friends, Ian. We all knew each other. Obviously, we went to the same high school. Jesus got there 2 years after we did, but nevertheless, we all knew each other. Plus, Ian and Jesus had been in middle school at one point together, so they knew each other prior to that too. So this was a new beginning of podcasting. Not mentioning the 3 of us had never really hung out together like that. It would either be me, Jesus, and another friend of ours, or me, Ian, and the group of friends from high school that we had. So this was a spin to it. And at first it was a little awkward, but we managed. We got the flow going, and we got a couple episodes in. We were on a platform known as Anchor when we first got the podcast going. And it gave me, where ending school, kind of like made me feel like I had lost a certain direction. The channel, the podcast, it gave me a new direction. As I mentioned in my story time about my toxic roommate, towards the beginning of 2021, I had to decide to move out. My lease was up and I didn't renew it because I just couldn't deal with that roommate anymore. I had spoken to family. They gave me a spot. And right around that time, going a little bit back, in 2019, I had actually applied for a service dog. I had heard about that for years. So, around this time was like, why not? Get a dog and she can help me. He or she could, well, at the beginning, I'll make a video about that too, my journey with my service dog. But at the beginning, I kind of wanted a boy dog. I ended up with a girl dog, obviously my dog Lucy. But yeah, I had to go through a whole process of applying, waiting, and then pandemic hit, so everything got put on hold. I got accepted, and I was actually supposed to fly out in December of 2020, but another, the cases of the, virus had spiked, so they postponed it to further notice. So right around the time that I was about to move out, I got the call from the school that they were gonna fly me out to Michigan, to the school where I got Lucy from. And I was just so excited, I was like, I'm gonna move out. I'm gonna be living with family, but at least I'm gonna have my dog soon. Life is interesting because that same day, literally like an hour after I got that call, I went out to run some errands, and like 2 blocks away from my house, a car hit me. Ran over my foot. I always joke around that we're looking to get more speed bumps on that road, and they were like, hey, let's use that blind guy's foot. But yeah, that wasn't fun. I needed surgery that same year. I had to get 2 screws in my foot. 2 ligaments in my foot were widened. So yeah, not fun. So I ended up moving out from that place, moving in with family. A little bit later, I ended up flying out to Michigan. They were like, yeah, is it okay if we get you a girl dog? I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Fell in love with this little pup that I met. She was about to be 2 years old, a yellow lab, big girl, friendly dog. But I wasn't used to having dogs. So, that, like I said, that'll be a video of its own. But just a lot of things happened. I was also trying to find another place to move out to because obviously, I didn't want to be a burden to my family. Fast forwarding to the end of that year, things didn't work out. And even till this day, I don't have communication with that family that I had moved out with. It hurts because I grew up with those family members and I never expected them to do what they did to me. But they did, and I forgave them, and I have moved on. And I hope that wherever they are, they're okay, and I wish them nothing but the best, and I love them, and that took a big toll on me. And little did I know that toll was going to be carrying on for the next few years. I started work when I had to move back from that family's house to the home I'm living with now, which is my immediate family, my parents and my siblings and my nephew. And that took a big toll also. Because when I moved out by myself, I had all these high expectations and I was so proud that I was living on my own. And in a span of a year and a half, I was back where I had started. And that took a big toll on me. When I moved back then with my family, I started looking for employment. Obviously I was still looking for other places to move out to, but I needed money. I found a couple jobs, didn't last too long because of my visual impairment. Finally, I got a job working at an agency that works with people with visual impairments. And I got an intern that I loved. I loved with all my heart because it pushed me. And I felt I thrived in that place. Unfortunately, it was an internship. I eventually moved up to a call center. And it was just not for me. I quit after working there for a couple months. Because my mental health was just in a shitty place. Because I felt everything that I had gained since 2019, I had lost. I ended up in a relationship for the last 2 years, in a romantic relationship with somebody who I met at that agency. And I'm not here to slander anybody. I'm never gonna do that. I'm no longer in that relationship with that person. Um, but the relationship wasn't bad, but it also wasn't the best of relationships, on both of our ends. I settled, and I was about to settle even harder because I felt that I didn't have, or I wasn't in the place in my life where I wanted to be. Fairly to that person. And I'm glad that nothing got pursued further than where we got, because I wouldn't have been happy, and worse, I wouldn't have been treating her in the way that she would have deserved. Not mentioning I was carrying all this baggage from the last few years. It wasn't until this year where I started little by little realizing and looking back and realizing that I was holding on to so much, not just from the last 4 years, but a lot of shit from my childhood, my adolescence, my early 20s. And it wasn't until I slowly started finding closure with a lot of those, and closing the doors to a lot of the healing, forgiving, understanding, reprogramming, manifesting, like all this stuff, getting closer to my spirituality, becoming a little bit more optimistic and positive. You know, it started a whole domino effect. Unfortunately, one of those things that I didn't want things to end, but they did. But everything does happen for a reason, and I do truly believe in that. And the positive twist to that is the fact that I feel I'm free now. And I'm not putting the blame on her. Yeah, she has her flaws and everything, but at the end of the day, she came into my life at the wrong time. And that wasn't her fault. If you ever see this video, I apologize for everything that I did, because I didn't treat you the way you were supposed to be treated. Like I said, you had your flaws, but the way I also went about said flaws was not the way I should have gone. And then from the bottom of my heart, I apologize for that. And I hope you're happy, and I hope you find happiness, like I told you before, because you are a very special person, and you always hold a special place in my heart. But I need to move on. And I'm speaking just, directly to anybody who has gone, is going, or will enter anything close to what I have spoken in this video about. You have to be careful. You have to be aware of your thoughts. You have to try your best to reach a place where you're in touch with your emotions. Unfortunately, our society, it has two ends. There's the hypocritical part where people, love yourself, all that, spiritual, motivational, rah-rah, but they don't always practice what they preach, or they're closed-minded. And then you have also the other side of our society, that being sensitive or having emotions or being a good person is unfortunately not celebrated, but looked down upon, because you're seen as weak. You have to choose yourself, whether you're man, woman, whatever you identify with, whatever your race, creed, age, disability, ability, whatever, nationality, ethnicity, doesn't matter. You have to decide for yourself where you want to be and what you want for your life. Because I gave that control to other people. I gave that control to my past traumas, my whirlwind of emotions, and I went off by it, and it led me to places I didn't want to be. I'm in a better place now. I feel I'm in a different place. I've once again awoken, and I'm able to move forward. And I hope that you guys can get to that point, or you are there now. You have to believe that better things are coming. You have to believe that you deserve happiness. You deserve healing. You deserve love. You deserve success. You have to love yourself before you expect anybody else to love you. You can't think that a degree, a diploma, or a certificate, a group of friends, a relationship, marriage, having kids, a certain physical appearance is going to give you worth. You have to give yourself that worth, that value. I wish I would have understood that at an early age, but things happen for the reason for they're supposed to happen. And that it makes sense. I'm all twisted around. If I could give any advice, whether it's journaling or just writing some affirmations down, telling yourself the things that you wish other people would have had told you growing up, or sometimes you got to be honest with yourself, the things that you are looking from other people, that validation, you got to write it down. Like for me, now I've made this a practice every day, a discipline mentally to, when I wake up and when I go to sleep, I have this whole list of affirmations telling myself I love you, looking at all the positive things, all the things that, I love about myself, all the things that I want to manifest in my future. And it's been over 2 months now, and it makes me feel better. And that's the first step, making you feel better. Things are not just going to change from one day to another, so you got to let go of those expectations. But affirmations really do work. You have to heal yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. And affirmations, if you believe in a higher power, if you believe, in a religion, get close to that. Forgive, let go. I will always say that forgiveness is not to let other people off the, whatever they did to you, to forgive them and so they can feel better, but to free you. Because I held on to so much things that was done to me and I didn't ask for them. So many things that I had no control over. So many things that was done towards me when all I did was give loyalty, love, and affection to others. And I got repaid back. But one thing, if you feel that, and if you think that, and if you see that in your life that you're getting constantly repaid with those type of treatments, another piece of advice I will have to give you is you have to look at the way you are treating yourself. Because we are what we attract, and we attract what we are. So if you are talking to yourself, if you are thinking about yourself, if you are treating yourself in said manner, then you are going to attract people that are going to disrespect you. They are not going to have boundaries with you, that are not going to care about you, that are going to use you. All of that, if you are treating yourself like that. If you can sit with yourself for a minute and be single or be alone without needing the attention, the validation, or a relationship, then right there, it tells you that there's a problem you need to address. You need to find that closure with yourself. That's what I had to do. Find that inner child that started this whole domino effect since half an hour ago, my life journey at the age of 8. That inner child, I had to find him as an adult now, like I would my own child. And I had to hug him. That sensitive kid that I let go of, I had to hug him and tell him it's going to be okay because I'm going to be right there. You don't need to worry about whether or not you're good enough, because you are, because you're you. You have something unique in you. You were born for greatness. Because I believe I was born for greatness. And our society, if you do that, you're conceited, you're arrogant, because there are people that kind of go, crazy with it. So take ownership of your greatness, of your self-love, of whatever gift you have. But not to hold it over other people's head, not to put other people down, or to make people come to you. Let go of that. Take ownership so you feel good. So you can serve the purpose that you were underserved, whether by God or whatever entity you believe in, or if you don't, just by life. You were born for greatness. I don't care who you are. I might not know you, but just remember that. I say that my gift is to preach and to give messages, reach people, whatever the message is that the universe, God, whoever wants me to deliver. So whoever it is, whoever this might be, if it touches you, it's because this message is for you. I might not know you, but the universe is trying to tell you that it's about time that you heal and you take charge of your life. You take control of yourself, your emotions. You love yourself. You treat yourself how you want to be treated. Don't worry about whether or not other people will see it. Don't worry about whether or not other people will come and treat you and give you what you want. You have to first and foremost start with that. Create that boundary line so that way, if you can disrespect yourself, others, you won't let others do that. Because believe me, you will see changes in your life. You gotta love yourself. Take ownership. And if you take anything away from this video, I've been rambling on for over half an hour. Take ownership of your greatness. Because you were born for greatness. Whatever that is will be up to you. That's your journey. Find the light and be free. So hopefully, if this helps at least one person, I hope it does. It helps me to be able to reflect and be able to share my story with you guys. And I hope that it helps. Don't give up. Don't give up hope. Don't give up on yourself. There is a better tomorrow, as cliche as that sounds. You were born for greatness. Keep that in mind. And if you don't believe it, repeat it, retell it to yourself until you do. Even if others don't see it. Fuck them. You live your life for yourself. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. Tune into my next story time episode for me to be on my soapbox. But I love you guys. I might not know you, but I love you guys. I'm Richie from the See It Through My Eyes channel. See It Through My Eyes podcast on YouTube here. Check out our channel. Support us. Help us get to our goal. And See It Through My Eyes on TikTok. Wherever you guys are, whatever you guys are going through, don't give up. And don't forget, you were born for greatness. And I love you. Take care.